Hi everyone, Ross here, and today we're going to talk about what is negative self-talk. I really want to get to the root of what negative self-talk is, and in the next couple of episodes we're also going to develop this further and talk about how to deal with negative self-talk. In this episode I really just want to get right to the heart of it, and we're going to explore different kinds of negative self-talk. We're going to explore why it happens. We're going to explore really the core psychological aspects of negative self-talk. This is a Deep Psychology podcast. I'm your host, Ross Edwards, writer, meditation teacher, founder of deep-psychology.com, and avid lover of all things psychological. In listening to this podcast, you're part of the worldwide deep psychology community of tens of thousands of people undertaking profound personal transformation. You can join us on any of the major podcasting platforms, and make sure to visit the site deep-psychology.com for lots of high quality resources. Let's get started. So you might have noticed that I'm outside. It's a lovely day. You might have noticed I've not posted for a few weeks. Well, I moved country in December, so there's my excuse. And yes, I am filming from my new home. So yeah, I'm back, and I will be back for the foreseeable. Negative self-talk then. Let's get right into it. What I how I want to set the background for this is to say that as humans we have certain fundamental experiences. Now, you can think of, say, the senses as our fundamental experiences, the sense of sight, sound, touch, taste and smell. You can think of these as our fundamental experiences. If you pull all those together, you get your experience of the entire world. You cannot interact fully with the world without those senses. However, this usual classification of our senses and of what we are experiencing is quite limited without including thought in there. Because if you've been alive for many years as a human being, and I'm guessing at some point you realise that you are experiencing thought, and you're experiencing it quite a lot. Actually, you might realise you're experiencing it in many cases more than your actual senses, or that your thoughts overtake your senses. So I think that's a really good place to start, to say that thought is as fundamental an experience as our senses are, because it can completely overpower our senses. Have you ever had the experience of driving somewhere and you arrive, 5 or 10 minutes later, you get to where you were supposed to be arriving to, or you end up a kilometre or two down the road, and you realise that whole time that you've actually not even been looking at the road really. Okay, your eyes might have been open and you might have been taking the road in, but actually the fundamental experience you were having was thought. Your senses were sort of offline. The point, thought is as fundamental as to our human experiences as our usual senses are. Unfortunately, because it's not really included a lot of the time with the senses, we can sort of overlook it. We can think that it's not that important, or somehow separate from our experience of the world. We've just got our senses, and then we've got our internal stuff. Won't go into all that today, but just take that as a fundamental principle, that your thought is very dominant. Thought comes in two modalities. It comes in the form of mental images, and it comes in the form of mental sounds. Now, when I teach people this in meditation, sometimes they get a bit confused, and they can say, well, Ross, sometimes we're remembering a song, or sometimes we're talking to ourselves, or sometimes we're sort of daydreaming. It's sort of like we're in an alternate reality because we're so lost in our mental world. Okay, fine, but if you actually break it down into its fundamental components, it doesn't matter what sort of thoughts you're having, whether it feels like you're daydreaming or not. It doesn't matter. Fundamentally, there are um, two components to our thinking, and it's mental images and mental sounds. Mental images meaning, um, right now you can imagine, you can imagine a tiger in your mind, but you can't actually see a tiger. Well, most likely you can't. Mental sounds being, right now you could imagine, let's think of a song. You can think of "We Will Rock You" by Queen. I've been listening to Queen these days. Very good band. You can imagine "We Will Rock You" by Queen, but you can't actually hear it unless you're, listening to it right now, like I've been. That's mental sounds. Where am I going with this? That what negative self-talk is it's mental sounds that are self-referential and that are negative, they're disempowering, they are often quite mean, to be quite blunt about it. They paint our lives in a very sort of depressing way, a very negative way. They are filled with sort of despair or self-loathing or low self-esteem or regret. It's mental sounds, self-referential, directed towards ourselves, and fundamentally it's charged with negative emotion of some kind. An example is you saying to yourself in your mind, "Oh, you're no good at this. You're never going to pass this exam. You're never going to be able to learn this thing," etc., etc. Or in the realm of like personal relationships, it's you saying, "You're not worthy of love. You're a failure. What about that relationship? You totally messed that one up, and then you're never going to find the person you want." It's almost as like this other entity within your consciousness is speaking to you directly. That's what negative self-talk is. Now listen, I said that thoughts are one of the main sense modalities, if we expand the definition of senses for now. What is interesting is that when you practice something like meditation, or you do some sort of awareness work, or some sort of therapy like cognitive behavioral therapy might help you realize this, or journaling perhaps, when you actually sort of in any way analyze or observe your mind, especially your mental chatter, because self-talk, we're really talking about mental sounds, not so much images, what you're probably going to realize is that a lot of it is very negative. It's not always self-directed, granted. You might be moaning about the world, or you might be moaning about other people. So it might not be that you're, criticizing yourself all the time, or, calling yourself names all the time. But fundamentally, the content of our mind is actually pretty negative a lot of the time. And take that with the insight that, well, if you analyse your thoughts as well, you might realise that a lot of it is self-directed, and a lot of it therefore is negative self-talk. What am I getting at is that a lot of the time we are actually in negative self-talk, and often it's easier to realise in other people than in yourself, because with our own minds we are so accustomed to being lost in thought all the time that it's kind of difficult. It's kind of like asking a camel what sand is, or it's kind of like asking what a fish what water is. What does water feel like? It's kind of impossible for them to understand, because they've not got any reference point. It's just they're lost in it. Same thing happens with our negative self-talk. A lot of the time, because it's so prevalent in our lives, we can't see it. So sometimes when you see it in other people, it's easy. Have you ever, perhaps a family member, a friend, someone you're close to, that you see that they speak to themselves in a certain way all the time, and it's always very negative? I know I mean, I could talk about myself because I've seen my negative self-talk for it, for what it is. But I can certainly see it in other people. Two people very close to me are they negative self-talk out loud. I wasn't even talking about it out loud, but they do it out loud. So imagine what's going on internally, and when they're not actually sort of showing what they're saying to themselves. I bet there's chatter there all the time. They literally say to themselves out loud things like, "Oh, you're useless," or "How could you have done that?" or "Oh, there you go again. You've done it again," or "You could never learn that," or they might not say it always to themselves, but they say it in a very sort of self-critical way, talking about themselves as it's in the first person, or they're speaking to themselves in the first person, like, "Oh, I could never do that," or "I'll never, have financial abundance in my life," or whatever it is. My point being that when you start to see negative self-talk for what it is, whether you're seeing it in other people or you see it in yourself, you're going to start to realize how all embracing it is, how prevalent it is, and you're going to start to realize how disempowering it is. Basically, what happens with negative self-talk is that there's a part of your self-image that is basic. It's fundamentally like it's judgmental. It's negative about your future. It's self-critical. It's full of sort of regret. It wonders what could have been. It wonders what could be if you were a different person, for example. It's basically like a sort of part of your. It's a part of your self-image that is lost in negativity, and it directs this negativity towards you. And what eventually happens if you give this negative self-talk, or that sort of negative disempowered part of yourself, if you give that lots of energy and you don't see it for what it is, it starts to take over your entire life. And basically negative self-talk becomes your default way. Now listen, I said that it's a very prevalent experience, but there's even levels within that. Within the fact that most of us will have negative self-talk quite a lot throughout the day, every day. If you really buy into it and you really sort of identify with that self-image, and you don't realize that we'll get on to this, how to get beyond this. It's not just that you have a dissociated part of your personality that is got a negative self-image. It's actually that that then becomes your identity. It becomes your personality. It becomes your sort of default way of speaking to yourself. And listen, if you see your negative self-talk for what it is, you're going to realize how disempowering it is. You're going to realize that as you buy into this identity, this sort of self-image, this negative self-image, and you act out what it tells you, you actually become the thing that it tells you. You start feeling the emotions that it kind of tells you to feel. I'm sort of speaking metaphorically here, but you literally start to feel, if you tell yourself internally that you're a waste of space. I know it's quite harsh, but if we tell ourselves things like that, you will start to literally feel like a waste of space, and you'll start to act like it, and other people will pick that up from you. You'll show that into the world, that that's what you think of yourself. So that's just to summarize so far. Our mind is very active. It's one of our main experiences in life. And a lot of it's negative, a lot of it's self-directed, therefore a lot of it is negative self-talk. And the way you can start to see that is to do something like meditation or journaling, or just observing your mind throughout the day and just realizing what's going on in there, especially in difficult moments where you have some sort of difficulty or problem in your life, or something goes wrong, or you do something you think you could have done better, you have some sort of life issue. these are the times where your negative self-talk will activate. But I did promise you, I wanted to, those are kind of, okay, those are good insights to have, but I want to share a bit about what negative self-talk really is when we get to the heart of the matter. Right, when you do something like meditation, a very powerful awareness practice, a very sort of direct, powerful awareness practice. It doesn't need to necessarily be traditional sort of meditation, but let's just go with that, because that's kind of my thing. What you begin to realize is that thoughts, when you experience them as you've always experienced them, which is basically with very little awareness, they seem very solid and real and believable, and like they're telling you the facts about your life, about yourself in this case. And you're kind of like a little person that is being swept away by a giant river, and you're flailing and you're trying to like grab onto the side, and you're trying to like gain some control over your body, but you're just completely taken away by the river because it's far too strong for you. That's what's happening most of the time with your mind. You're this little person that okay, let me explain that a different way. You haven't trained your awareness enough to realize that when you're lost in thought, you are like this little person that is being completely swept away by their mind, and that then believes in their mind and believes everything that it tells you. With meditation, you can start to realize, or some sort of similar practice, right? You can start to realize that thoughts are actually, there's nothing substantial about them. You cannot grab onto them. Like, I'm holding my sunglasses right now. You cannot do that with your thoughts. So if I'm having a thought, I can't do that with it. There's nothing there. They're fundamentally insubstantial. And when you taste this insubstantiality, even just one taste of it, although it takes years to really train it to a high level, that really changes how you relate to your thoughts. You start to realize that thoughts are not permanent. When you turn your attention towards them, you realize that they're actually very fleeting. They don't tend to last for very long. The problem is that it's like the strong river that you're in. Each individual sort of wave or flow piece of, each little area of moving water in the river only lasts for a split second. If you were trying to fix your attention on one area of the river and you're watching it, it would disappear very quickly because the water's always churning and moving. The same thing's happening with our thoughts, that each individual thought is actually very short-lived. Often it's just a few seconds. It doesn't matter how negative the self-talk is or any other kind of mental talk. It's short-lived, it's fleeting, it doesn't last forever. The problem is, if you're lost in the river of thought, it seems to last forever because your attention is not on each individual wavelet or area of water. Your attention is swept up in the river of thinking. You can start to realize they're insubstantial. You start to realize that they are fleeting and short-lived. And ultimately, you start to realize that, how can I say this? They are essentially lies and fabrications. Your negative self-talk is essentially a lie and a fabrication. And I know that your standard psychological textbooks won't tell you that, but you can discover this for yourself. You can see that, sure, it might really feel that it's talking to you and that it's defining who you are as a person. It's talking about your past and your future, blah, 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 blah. All of that is a construction. All of it is just, it's stuff. And you can regain I don't know about regain. You can gain the ability to see that it's just It's nonsense. It all points to something that isn't really there. It points to kind of this person, and you realise that doesn't even make any sense. So my approach to negative self-talk, and we're going to come back next week and talk about this, is basically to, yes, we can observe it. Yes, we can, get a handle on what our self-talk is. That's great. However, to me, the most powerful method is to sort of take it a step further and to go into the very nature, the sort of sensory nature of what thought actually is, and what sort of insights we can have based on that. So parting tips is just to watch yourself and others, watch for how we speak to each other, and watch how people speak to themselves, watch how you speak to yourself internally, and just start to realise that this is what negative self-talk is, and start to be very aware of what it does to you. And if you're very honest with yourself, don't just take this on as a nice theory. I want you to really see this. Only by seeing it is it powerful. You have to see how it takes your life away. It wastes you away with negative stories about who you are and about what you're capable of and about where you fit into life and your value and everything really. If your self-image gets wrapped up in this, it's really a recipe for disaster. And I really want you to see this. So, excellent. I think that's all I want to say about negative self-talk, and we shall be back next time with meditation methods for seeing through your self-talk, how to deal with self-talk using meditation. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you very soon. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please leave a review. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email me at ross@deep-psychology.com. If you'd like to go deeper, head to deep-psychology.com for articles, courses, ebooks, and one-to-one coaching. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.